Yo, what's good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Gifted Hoops Podcast, episode 55. And I'm joined here today by a great Raptors fan, passionate content creator. You can catch her on the Pros and Claws Substack. Iman, how's it feeling?
Good. I feel good. Dishes and Dimes also coming back. So
yes, that's good.
A lot of good things happening right now. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to say we had a conversation last year about the entire Raptors team. So in this podcast, we will be discussing the 2025 Raptors and also how the 2024 season ultimately went down. You can catch this podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts at the Gifted Hoops Podcast. You can also find the video version with our lovely faces on the YouTube at Gifted Hoops. But without further ado, let's get right into it. So it's been a year. I want to get your reactions as a Raptors fan in terms of the 2024 season. I remember coming in, we talked about the players that were going to be important to see what was going to happen. Were they going to pay some players or not? But overall, where were your expectations headed into 2024? And how do you think you left coming out of that?
Honestly, I think my expectations were pretty high going into 2024, only because OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam are very good basketball players. And I'm like, they haven't traded them now. Like, who's to say? But a large part of what made me nervous is they were heading into the season without a point guard, which didn't make sense to me. The 2023 season didn't work out because they went in without a center for 75% of the year. And then they were like, yeah, instead of running it back with a point guard, they're like, Dennis Schroeder. Did you guys see him in FIBA? He's going to be your starting point guard, which was not a good idea. And so looking back at it, I think last season went about as horribly as they could have expected. I thought the OG Anunoby trade was really good. I was a fan of the OG Anunoby trade. I love OG. OG's one of my favorite players ever. He was great as a Raptor. I think he's great as a Knick. But he very clearly, his time with the Toronto Raptors was ending. He was about to be a free agent. They were going to watch him walk away, similar to seeing with Fred VanVleet. And he wanted to be on the Knicks. He signed with CAA. That is the number one sign that he's about to go somewhere. Specifically to the Knicks. So, looking at that, to get back Emmanuel quickly and get back RJ Barrett, who are two young pieces that you can build this core around, and I'm sure we're talking about BBQ in a bit. I liked it. I was all on board with that, and then it made sense to trade Siakam. Although those numbers, I was going through them today, those numbers with Siakam, and you have RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickly, Scottie Barnes, and Jakob Poeltl, they didn't look too bad. And I was starting to buy into that team. And I think the most disappointing part of last season really was the trade of Pascal Siakam. Not just that they moved off of him, which fine, it made sense. I see that. But the package that they got back for him didn't make sense, especially holding out for so long. So I think last season you have to look at as a disappointment, no matter, what side of the Raptor fan base you're on, if you're the pro tankers or if you were keep it all together. I think last season was a disappointment because you got back less than you really should have because you waited so long.
Yeah, I think that we're aligned with that, right? Because we came in saying, okay, what is the direction going to be? They haven't traded Pascal yet. They still have OG. And we always said that, well, if they're not going to trade Pascal, they might wind up losing him for nothing if they don't want to overcommit and pay him. So to see him traded, while I do feel like it's a loss considering how much you could have gotten if you traded him a year before, I do like the fact that they finally committed to a clear direction. We're going to go young. We're not going to go through the regular way where like we just tank and then try to get draft picks. They got actual valuable players to benefit from Raptors overall development, which takes us into the BBQ era, which I'm actually kind of excited for. I like the younger players. I like the growth of Emmanuel Quickly. Scottie Barnes to me was a big player that we talked about last year. And I feel like he rose to a lot of those expectations last year, improving his game as a passer, rebounder, playmaker, overall decision maker. He became a much better player playing through contact, way more physically. And then after the trade, you saw RJ Barrett play his best basketball. So I'm kind of excited to see what that shapes itself out to be. Even though you can say that last year was a failure, I gotta say, once all those guys were officially traded, Raptors basketball was a lot more watchable for me.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't disagree that like the OG trade, all on board. Love that. To me, the disappointment comes from you have your all NBA player and you got back absolutely nothing, and you did it because you waited entirely too long. But I completely agree with you. I think, unfortunately, the Raptors suffered a lot of injuries. So I think they had like 1 or 2 wins to close out the year. And they, had a player very famously bet against them in games, which, I mean, when you have active players on the team betting against you and betting on you to lose games, it's not a great sign that things are
That was crazy
for the team. Insane. Not a good sign that things are going well for the team. But I agree. I think that like RJ Barrett, I don't know if because the Raptors were in a losing situation, the team was not very good, of course, especially after Scottie Barnes went down. I don't think people recognize truly how good RJ Barrett was. His numbers, I think I have them somewhere. I think his field goal percentage jumped up by 13% or something crazy from the low 40s to the mid 50s. His 3-point percentage jumped up by 6%. And this was sustained from the moment the trade happened. And he was a large part of this team, right? A bunch of guys went down, including Scottie Barnes for a large chunk of it. And so the team really did rely on RJ Barrett. And it was as a Raptor fan who kind of watched the Knicks and was like, I don't really get the RJ Barrett experiment. As soon as he came to the Raptors, I'm like, oh, I get it. Oh, I believe. I've bought in. And, especially at the time, a lot of the trade talk was, this is a trade for Emmanuel Quickley. This is a trade for the Raptors to get their point guard. They finally want a point guard, and they have to take RJ Barrett to make the money work. That's how a lot of people were framing the trade, and it was very clear from the jump that, no, RJ Barrett is an integral part of this, and he matters to what this Raptors team is, plan on doing, especially because, he is a local kid. His dad is, around, he grew up around this team, right? The Raptors front office have known RJ Barrett since he was a kid. This is his city. So there are a lot of, ties there, and him coming in, it wasn't just, we're bringing in a Canadian, how everyone wants the Raptors to get
right.
And not Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. You guys are picking the wrong Canadian. It was very clear that his role with the Knicks wasn't he wasn't in a good role with the Knicks, and he can come onto the Raptors team that's trying to find his spot, and he's found it. Now, that's not to say, and I think we'll talk about this a little bit more, that's not to say that he is a forever staple on this team. I think when you're looking at, if I had to pick 2 of BBQ to be here long term, I probably would still pick IQ and Scottie, and that's just because from RJ Barrett's position, you still need defense, which I think, in terms of his offense, it really did come along, but defensively, I think it's a lot more potential than seeing it in actuality, because RJ Barrett does look like somebody who should be he looks like someone who should be an elite defender. When you think about, what his skill set is, his athleticism, his size, he's just incredibly big. It's such a bully. But and I think it's not totally fair to him because he was on a tanking team. But if that's something where we're not seeing shoring up with RJ Barrett, then you can see him as a sort of third man in BBQ. But as of right now, he's still an integral piece.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I think that for RJ to play his best basketball after the trade is very, very promising. But obviously, to cement him as a part of this young core moving forward, you do want to see him be able to replicate a lot of that with the core for a full season. And it's good that he's still young. RJ at every level has been a very late bloomer, so I don't think it can be ruled out that his growth can be a serious thing. But as you mentioned, I think the biggest takeaway had to be Scottie Barnes, right? I mean, we saw him go out there and dominate ball games, especially after the Pascal trade, right? He wasn't some guy that was okay, he's putting up good stats, so he can be all-star. I feel like he outright earned the right to be called all-star. And I feel like this whole era of new Raptors basketball, it starts with him. Yeah. How excited are you to move forward with Scottie Barnes as the future of the Toronto Raptors as their franchise player, especially after the long-term extension that they just signed to him?
Honestly, it's really exciting, especially to see the growth that he had. I think heading into last season, it was a lot of well, you didn't trade him for Kevin Durant. You didn't trade him for Damian Lillard. Let's see what he can truly be. Can he be that guy? And even I was saying that, you're not going to be put in a situation again where you can dangle him as a trade chip for that superstar, right? Like Knicks fans saw that with RJ Barrett. He could be the dangling piece in superstar trades in the first 2 years of his career, but once you get to year 3 and he hasn't blossomed into what, the potential was, then he's not going to be that guy anymore. And for Scottie, it was the complete opposite. He cemented himself as like, no, you shouldn't trade him. He should be the centerpiece of your team. You were right to hold off on those earlier trades. And I mean, he's a star. I really think that we saw the breakout that you needed to see from Scottie Barnes last year. There are obviously some other aspects of his game he still needs to continue to develop, but I think in year 3, he cemented himself, in my opinion, as the best player from his draft class. Like, I think that there was legitimate conversation to be had in year 1. Of course, you won Rookie of the Year, but that was a debate. You could have said Mobley won it, and I wouldn't have faulted you for that. You could say, okay, didn't get hurt and all that other stuff. By year 2, I think a lot of people were talking about the downward slump that Scottie had. And by year 3, it's like, no, he's the all-star of the bunch, and he's the all-star of the bunch for a reason. There was, Franz Wagner is the guy that you should have picked. And I don't think that there was a whisper of that last season because Scottie Barnes really did cement himself as, in my opinion, the best player from his draft class.
Yeah, I think that Scottie Barnes definitely has so far. I think there's potential for one other player, maybe Cade, if he can have a healthy season, right, to get back in those talks. But yeah, but seeing what Scottie Barnes did, though, just in terms of him having the ball in his hands more to make mistakes and make overall decisions, you saw him really be a winning player, right? His defense was big. Mm-hmm. The way that he's completely embracing the physicality to get to his spots and being comfortable with shooting threes more, opening up that part of his game more. Like, he was a consistent triple-double threat repeatedly, and any talent who can do that and be a plus defender at that size, that just projects to be a very good player moving forward. A lot of people might have problems with them overcommitting to Scottie, but I feel like, guys, we're in a new era. This is the new CBA era. If you do not pay your guys, if you do not extend your guys, you find yourself in a much bigger problem 2, 3, or 4 years from now. And a guy like Scottie Barnes, who again plays defense every year, improves in terms of his feel for the game, is tall and just has that prototypical like future wing type body who can do everything. That's a guy that you want to invest in. And again, I said this last year too, the Raptors development with Scottie Barnes, they believe that they can make him into a really viable player in the next 4 to 5 years. So I don't really have a problem with that, because it's either you do that or you play out the season. He's not going to be happy. You have to think about maybe moving him. And then it's like, okay, what are you moving him for? Are you going to get the same value back? You already waited too long with Pascal. Do you want to really go through that again? No. So I think paying him is fair. And I think that the nucleus he's with, again, I really feel like Immanuel Quickley, if his chemistry can get right with him as well, that can be a pretty good 1-2 punch in terms of guard and wing combination. So I don't really have an issue with it.
Yeah, I think that was the hope when they made the deal. I really think that that's what people were looking for, was bringing in Immanuel Quickley for that exact reason. And Immanuel Quickley needs to take that next step. He just got paid his big dollars as well. And so, both of these two guys are coming into their big contracts, and I'm excited to see it because I genuinely believe in both Immanuel Quickley and Scottie Barnes' skill set, and I think they can be entirely complementary of each other. And because the Raptors don't really have an extra point guard, those are going to be your two guys that I think are going to be staggered a lot. I think you want to see how they work well together. So we're going to obviously start with them. But I think you're going to see both of them staggered a lot as well. So you'll get to see both of them as lead ball handlers, and you'll also get to see how Scottie works alongside Immanuel Quickley as his main point guard.
Yeah, I can't wait to see how that overall chemistry builds and builds and builds. The next question I would have to ask you about, you mentioned this, right? Nick Nurse essentially giving up on the team, whatever it was, and then him really moving on, thrusting a new head coach into his first role. Is that I want to ask you if you are satisfied with the first year you saw from your head coach, and if you think he is the rightful coach for this team moving forward. Very young team, but I love his passion and how seriously he takes the game.
Yeah. I think something that people are unfair about regarding coaches is we often allow, like when we talk about players, we talk about Scottie being young and having him grow every single year. We talk about the growth of players, especially, from being rookies to sophomores to being, veterans in this league. And the same is true for coaches. Coaches also have to improve. Coaches also have to, they learn things when you get the keys and get to run your team. I think there are a lot of lessons that Darko Rajakovic took from his first season. I mean, I'd hope he'd take them, and we'll hopefully be able to see that this year. In terms of like him versus Nick Nurse, I've always said that they're he is the anti-Nick Nurse. It was very clear to me that the Raptors went in the complete opposite direction of Nick Nurse. For one, obviously the emphasis for the team on the offensive end versus the defensive end. Two, you talked about the sort of personality that he plays with, very different than Nick Nurse as well. I think that I'd be lying if I said that Darko, I thought, had a good first season. I think he came in and really tried to just change quite a bit for the team, especially on the offensive end. I mean, they changed their entire plan offensively. And, a lot of people faulted Nick Nurse for how difficult the defense was, right? The Raptors defense with Nick Nurse, because it was Vision 6-9, because they didn't have a center, and it worked for the first year. It worked when they made the playoffs that one year. It just didn't work the second year because legs were tired, guys were tired. They were overextending themselves in the Raptors defense. The whole idea behind it was, you're so long, you can guard on the perimeter and rotate back to the rim. Like, you guys should be able to do that. That's what Vision 6-9 should be. It's how much space can you take up on the court to close everything up that you don't need to have, a traditional nominal center, your backline of your defense. You guys can all just do it. And I think it overextended guys like OG, Pascal, and Scottie. And I think guys got really tired of that. And we saw that when they were forced to bring in a center in Jakob Poeltl. And then the opposite happened for Darko Rajakovic, right? So Darko's plan, honestly, threw defense to the wayside last year. I don't know that the Raptors even played any, especially if Jakob wasn't there. I don't know that, Scottie looked good defensively. We had moments with Pascal, OG also looked bad defensively on the Raptors for a good chunk of it, where you would never actually say that about OG Anunoby. It's just true of what the Raptors team looked like for a good while. But it was the offense that changed so much. And I know, we'll talk about the offense, I think, longer, but to just talk about how Darko Rajakovic changed it. And it was a wholesale change for a team that was finding a new direction, for a team that was moving away from everything. And I thought it was a little bit too much too soon, and there was no emphasis on defense. And I think we saw with Summer League this year that there is an emphasis on defense now, and there is less of an emphasis on this 0.5 offense that he tried to run last season.
Yeah, I really feel like we are not fair enough to coaches, because we often look at players and we say, okay, well, they can get better here, but people don't really understand what it's like to coach an NBA basketball team, to have to manage egos and then minutes and then make pulls, especially a younger team that's going through a transitionary stage. I feel like a part of that was him just trying to give the players a break, but also let them gel in a happy way, which is good. But I think for the next overall season, they're going to get back to the Raptors identity in terms of being a team that's tall, size, but also takes pride in their defense. And I think that having a guy like that who is charismatic, who defends his players, who, fights. I mean, I will never forget the Lakers post game he had where he was like, Scottie Barnes, right? Like, I love the passion and the intensity I saw from that. So I think it's fair to give him grace and give him more time. Everyone, including the coaching staff, has to grow together to learn how to bond and develop and win games, right? So to me, that makes a ton of sense. I don't really have any problem with that. I would say moving forward, the offense is something that I find very interesting, because I think you have a lot of players who can have real value in it. Again, BBQ can work if you see Scottie's ball handling continue to improve with IQ's 3-point shot make. I think that's huge. But there is one player that I do want to bring up. I'm not sure how many Raptors fans feel about this player, but I do want to see Gradey Dick become a valuable player for this Raptors team as a 3-point spacer, passer. I think he has potential, but he's had a very rough start.
Yeah, I thought you were about to say Bruce Brown. I was about to just duck out of here. That was Bruce Brown, makes me uncomfortable a little bit. No, I think with Gradey Dick, he had a rough start. He definitely had a rough start to the season. I mean, his rookie season in the beginning was nothing short of abysmal. But what the Raptors did is they sent him away to really get his conditioning done. And they really worked on conditioning, trying to get him up to NBA speed. And I think that that's one of the most underrated changes for rookies coming into the league. Of course, there's size that you're going up against that you don't go up against college players, but it's also the speed and the conditioning of the game. These guys are now playing 82 games a season. They're on the road for so much of it, and the 48-minute games, right? It's a lot more on the body. And we saw Gradey Dick really struggle with his conditioning early on. But after that, I think if you look at his splits post January or February, he really started to change. Like, it went from not being able, like, seeing Gradey Dick put a shot up and be like, I guess we need to get, our rook some reps, to actually believing in the shots going up and actually celebrating it. Like, he really did transform into a player that you saw the potential for. And I think Gradey Dick also has great size. I think there's a lot of things to be optimistic about in terms of adding Gradey Dick into this team. And to be quite honest, I think he's the Raptors' 5th starter. I think we're going to see him start for the team at the 2 spot. Right now that Gary Trent Jr. is elsewhere, you need a shooting guard, and I genuinely think that Gradey Dick will be this team's starting shooting guard opening night.
I don't have a problem with that, mainly because they're a young team, so that's fine. But him coming in as the shooter with IQ in the backcourt with the defense can work. Again, Gradey Dick's physicals in terms of like his size fits in perfectly to what the Raptors love to do. So if he can be a viable guy, especially as a guy who could be used as a movement off the ball shooter, it can open up a lot of lanes for your athleticism to me.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that's the vision behind bringing in a guy like Gradey Dick. And I think he's shown enough in Summer League. I think he showed enough in the second half of last season that you have to trust that this is your guy to come in and do this. And so he's your starting 2 guard. I think some people would point to, Jacoby Walter, who the Raptors drafted. But I don't think in terms of his development, I think we're going to see a similar trajectory that we saw with Gradey Dick, where I think the first part of the season is going to be a lot. You don't just bring in a rookie and start him right away. On a team that isn't tanking. Like, this is a team that's retooling. Yeah, this is a team that's going to lose a whole lot of games, but they're also not actively tanking. And so I do think starting Gradey Dick makes the most sense. I think you'll see a lot of your veterans have playing time, but as a 2 guard, that's the spot that you really need someone. And just in terms of his shooting, Gradey Dick I think provides exactly what you need there.
Great. Well, we talked about offense. I want to ask you something, right? What player do you think will take the biggest leap defensively for this Raptors team and really become like the captain of their defense this season, if you have to choose one?
I mean, the captain of their defense is Jakob Poeltl. As long as Jakob Poeltl is healthy, the Raptors can be a fine defensive team. If Jakob Poeltl is hurt at all, I have zero hope for the Raptors defense. I genuinely, and it's unfortunate they don't have a backup center. I mean, there are lots of people hoping that Christian Coloco's medical health gets better. I mean, he's still technically on the Raptors payroll. He's still technically, I believe, just a Raptor, but there's a lot of course, medical conditions for those who don't know. That's why Christian Coloco is not currently in the league. He was the Raptors' backup center in his rookie season. And so I think there's a lot of it comes down to Jakob Poeltl. If Jakob Poeltl is healthy, and you can look at the numbers in the splits last year, I had them here a second ago, their defensive rating with him off the court is abysmal. And I genuinely don't know that, especially because the Raptors really don't have any good point of attack defense. Emmanuel Quickley and RJ Barrett really need to step up defensively. Them coming in from the Knicks system, you're like, yeah, you guys played with Tibbs. You guys should have some of this in you, but they don't. And so that's going to be where both of them, I think, really need to take a step up. I think you trust Scottie Barnes there, but I don't think you want Scottie Barnes to be the backline of your defense. You need a real center there. You need size there, and that's Jakob Poeltl. And he is a legitimate rim protector. He is a legitimately good rim protector in the league. He's elite at it, and we see the numbers when he's off the court and when he's on the court. I genuinely think if the Raptors hope to have any sort of fight in them this season and play well this season, it's because of Jakob Poeltl being healthy. He matters so much to what this team does. Of course, Scottie Barnes is their superstar. Of course, you need the offense from Emmanuel Quickley and RJ Barrett, but defense matters so much, and we saw that last season with this team struggling. And so Jakob Poeltl, he's the leader. He's what matters the most. It's him. This team sort of goes as he goes because they lose their defense if he's out for extended time.
I love the Yaka point because even last year you saw the impact when he was on the floor or not. He absolutely is the captain of their defense. The back line, you need him, right? So that's a very important player. I was going to say Scottie Barnes defense, who I feel like year after year after year gets better. And I wouldn't be surprised if he takes another positive leap there. But as you said, I think the defense as a committee from your younger players is really what you want to have to be strong, just in terms of understanding where to be and having situational awareness off the ball. I think if all those things are able to improve themselves with Jakob healthy, this can be a viable team to compete night in and night out in the Eastern Conference. But before we get to power ranking the East and really going through where you feel like the Raptors are in that mix, were you satisfied with the Raptors offseason?
I mean, yeah, I think that so much of what this team will look like moving forward depends on what you have currently. And I mean, Masai Ujiri and Bobby Webster always preach patience, and so I wasn't surprised that they didn't do more. I was surprised that they kept all of their picks because they talked about not possibly doing that, and everyone talked about this not being the best of draft classes, but I'm still not surprised by any of the moves that they made this offseason. I wasn't surprised. I think a lot of people were that Gary Trent Jr. is no longer on this team, and but like besides that, which maybe that surprised me a little bit in just that, like, even though I knew that he didn't fit with this team and moving forward, I just thought, can we really risk losing more guys for nothing this offseason? And the Raptors said, yes, we can. So that was surprising. But outside of that, I can't say that I was at all, like, I will say the one thing that like Raptor fans celebrated. It's been a long time since Raptor fans have celebrated a move this in an offseason. And the one move that they celebrated was a trade to get Davion Mitchell, but really to trade away Jalen McDaniels, who unfortunately just could not, you would think that he sort of looks and fits the mold of a Raptor just in terms of his size and his length, but
didn't fit that well though. Yeah.
He did not fit that well at all. He really did struggle. I hope he's in a better situation. I hope he can find some playing time, but he really did struggle last season. And so I think for Raptor fans, that move really was a good one, especially bringing in a guy like Davion Mitchell, who has not been able to make it work with the Kings, but I think he was high on the Raptors draft class in his draft year, which now was 4 or 5 years ago. He's been in the league for a minute now. So hopefully he can make it work in his new spot. But yeah, I'm not too surprised with anything else. I think Gary Trent Jr. leaving makes sense, and then trading Jalen McDaniels was nice.
Yeah, I kind of feel like the Raptors offseason to me was a lot more predicated on just focusing on the fundamentals with the player development of your younger players. I think Davion Mitchell can have an impact on this team again. He's another guy that's very good defensively. I think offensively, sometimes in spurts, he leaves a lot more to be desired, but I feel like with the Raptors, he can really find a role. The Bruce Brown thing is like, I don't know what's going on with that. I thought he might be an asset that the Raptors try to flip. I thought that would have took place during the offseason, but it seems like you're going into the season with Bruce. That's the one thing that I thought the Raptors would have made a solid move on already, but
I forgot
we didn't really
about
see
him
much happen with that.
answering that. Me completely honest. I was thinking about the names on the roster, and I mentioned Bruce Brown earlier and how we can't be talking about him right now because I'm confused by it entirely. But I don't know. Maybe the Raptors felt like they needed additional veteran presence. But yeah, no, I don't understand him still being on this team. I thought he would have been moved honestly last year. I was waiting for a move at the deadline for Bruce Brown, and that didn't happen. And then I was like, okay, at the draft, and that didn't happen. And then the offseason. It's interesting, but maybe they feel like they can get something out of him, or maybe it's just additional veteran presence because this team now is coming in with a whole lot of rookies and a whole lot of young guys, which they're not a team that wants to tank either, right? So this is a team that actually wants to go out there and win some games. And so I wouldn't be surprised to see Bruce Brown playing some minutes you need a backup point guard. He did that for a bit in Denver. I know that's not necessarily his role and the best fit, but he's done that before. And, he kind of is your everyman. And if you look at the Raptors bench, they kind of need an everything. So maybe he kind of slots in and gets to give you some minutes there. Did not work out for them last season, but hopefully with an off season and a training camp, everything changes a little bit there.
Yeah, I definitely want to see how those things pan out. That kind of does take us to the Eastern Conference, which has significantly changed, I would say. There are a lot of teams that have made leaps. I think last year, seeing the growth that we saw from the Orlando Magic, a team that was kind of on the outs to where they almost made the playoffs as like a comfortable like top 4 seed almost, and seeing that they're moving in the direction to be that this year is great. The Sixers trading for Paul George now. The Celtics are going to be back. They just won the title. The young Pacers. I'm curious about your perspective in terms of what you think the Eastern Conference will evolve and be, and where do the Raptors fit into that over the next few years?
Over the next few years is really interesting. I think for right now, it's... Okay, so first, I guess I'll get to right now. Right now, I think that I don't think that there's any sort of fight of like, who are the top 8 teams in the Eastern Conference? I think you have that carved out for you. I think you know who the top teams are in the Eastern Conference. It's your Celtics, it's your Sixers, it's your Bucks, it's your Pacers, it's your Cavs. Who am I forgetting? The Magic and the Heat. I think you can maybe throw in the Hawks, although the Hawks to me are the most interesting because I don't know what they're going to look like with the changes that they made this season. I don't know if you have a more clear view on what the Atlanta Hawks look like this year. And then you have the bottom teams. And I think the Raptors are, fairly in the bottom teams, but they could be one of the bottom teams that make a run for the play-in. So I think that they're in that bottom half. I think their goal is to try to be the 9-10. I do think a lot of things will have to go right for them to be there. Mainly health for Jakob Poeltl, as you mentioned, health for Scottie Barnes. This is not a team with a whole lot of depth. So you have to really trust that the Scottie Barnes, the Jakob Poeltls, Manuel Quickley, and RJ Barrett are really healthy. You're at least your top 4 starters there. But yeah, there's a lot of question marks to me with the Eastern Conference. Like, I don't know what Chicago Bulls are. They seem like a bad team to me. Like, I would imagine that Zach Lavine and Vooch are not on the team come the end of the season. I can't imagine that they're both there. The Wizards also. The Hornets seem like they're in the mix of like the top of the play-in range. It does matter on like. No, I think they're fairly above. Like, they might be just like above what I expect the Raptors to be. If they're the 9 seed, I would expect the Raptors to be a 10 seed there. And then I have the rest of the Eastern Conference, like the Detroit Pistons and so on and so forth. At the top of the East, though, in terms of like projecting years out, Milwaukee Bucks are old, and they're only getting older. The Philadelphia 76ers, I'm also putting them in that sort of old, only getting older category. The Miami Heat, same thing. And so there are some teams in there that I really think are falling out. And there are a lot of teams that have really big question marks. The Cleveland Cavaliers, I think they're obviously very happy to have kept Donovan Mitchell, but then we have questions about Darius Garland. What can they get for him? Are they planning on moving him, and for who and what? And how can they sort of build up that team for years to come? So I think the East is really interesting in terms of all of the various questions that they have. I'm very interested to see what the Knicks look like. I think the Knicks, to me, are one of the teams I'm most excited about. But I was kind of I posted this a few weeks ago, and everyone was, I guess, a few months ago when the trade happened, and everyone was really excited. And I'm like, this is a team that everyone gets really high on. But then if the playoffs come around and we get a couple of second-round outs, because I'm still looking at, if Paul George and Joel Embiid work, if you have the Celtics, if some of these other teams with the superstars work, because I think you can look at a Joel Embiid and Paul George. If Paul George is playing well, I mean, people will probably say it's the playoffs. It's not going to happen, but we've seen playoffs where he played really well. I still think that they would sort of have the 2 best players in a series. And I know the conversation last year with Jalen Brunson and having a small guard, and that whole conversation went kind of haywire last year about what that looks like in the playoffs. But I imagine that in a couple of years, if we don't see finals runs, not even conference finals runs, but finals runs for this Knicks team, people are going to be talking about, you can't build a team with a whole bunch of all-stars, with a whole bunch of elite role players and things like that. You need that Joel Embiid. You need that Jason Tatum, that sort of superstar? Is that Jalen Brunson? Can that guy be a 6-foot guard? I think we're going to hear a lot of those conversations. But for right now, I'd of course put the Knicks in there, and I'd be interested to see if maybe, I don't know, if like, do you flip Julius Randle to try and get some stuff back? Like, are there moves to be made there? So I think the East has like a lot of really exciting teams, and it sucks that the Raptors are no longer a part of that. You're not looking at the Raptors roster and being like, what can you do with some of these guys? And I feel like for years that was like, it was the Raptors in that conversation, right? Whether it was Kyle or DeMar or Pascal, Fred VanVleet, whatever it is. And for the first time, it's like, no. The Raptors have their tiny core and they're just trying to add to it. And while the rest of the East is looking at being on the top 4, and
Yeah, I want to say great words. The reason why I do this podcast during the off season, where like we get like a great introduction to all these teams, is because things change in the NBA so rapidly that there's big changes to always, talk about, right? In my opinion, I think the 2 teams in the Eastern Conference that are probably going to be teams that are trying to be in the play-in race that people think aren't going to be that great, I think it's the Raptors and the Hornets. These 2 teams stand out the most to me because they're teams that are trying to be good, are establishing a young core, but more importantly, I feel like they're put together teams that can be competitive. The Raptors really stand out because they finally made their pivot to Scottie Barnes. They traded for 2 young players who, if the Raptors really develop them well, have very good signs in their game that can fit and make them overall competitive. And they have a big in Jakob Poeltl, who, whenever he's on the floor, your lineups are a whole lot better. So I like the aspect of that team defensively and what their offense could grow to with time and continuity, right? A team like the Hornets, which a lot of people think are just going to be bad, I really look at them as a team that is going to have a fresh start with a healthier LaMelo Ball, hopefully, with a new head coach, which to me, I think he's a good head coach. He can instill a great sense of understanding what it takes to win basketball games to that young team. And with Brandon Miller, who had a great rookie year last year, what he could do with a fully healthy LaMelo, and also Trey Mann, who was very good for them as well when he got traded there. I think those are 2 teams that are younger teams that you're not going to have high up there, but could take really important developmental steps to be good next year and the year after that, right? So those are those 2 things. And then again, teams like the Magic, where 3 years ago they were like not even thought of, and now it's like they trade for KCP. They have many players who can be great defensive players, and they have the potential as a team to be like a top 5 defensive team in basketball, period, West and East. So I look at it like the whole Eastern Conference is really anew, and there's pressure on a lot of these teams. The 76ers, pay Paul George all the money. They're willing to be deep into the apron or however they have to be to have their core. Can it work with Paul George? Is Yabusele going to be a good fit for them, or was he just the guy that balled out in the Olympics, right? These are questions that we have about.
Yabusele, Canada doesn't have a medal because of you.
That is true. And also Jamal Murray. Sorry to say it. I'm sorry to say it, but
honestly, I just blame the Memphis Grizzlies. I know, like, we're talking about the Eastern Conference, but they kept Zach Edey from my medal hopes and dreams.
Oh wow, I forgot. That's actually true. They didn't let him play, right?
Any big you have, we're keeping.
Yes, they were on that for sure. So yeah, like, I look at the East as if it's an interesting conference. I don't think that the Raptors are a tanking team. No. For as long as I've been watching basketball, they don't tank. Even if people think that, like, okay, they lost all these games, they should tank, and maybe they can get a player that's generational, like maybe Cooper Flagg, the Raptors just simply are not going to tank. They're going to fight through it. They're going to try to be as good as they can be. And I think that's what makes them dangerous, because I still don't think that they're bad enough to where you can go in expecting to win because of what they can do defensively, because of how Scottie Barnes can take over games.
Yeah, I mean, the Raptors don't tank. The one year that they tanked, they were in Tampa, and it was the worst season. Their gym was a banquet hall. Like, they were literally like away from their families. They were living out of Airbnbs, and their kids had to find schools in the middle of the year. It was a mess of a season for them. And that was the one year that they decided to tank. But the Raptors just don't tank. And I genuinely believe that there are some teams that are just really bad this year. There are some teams that it's going to be difficult to be worse than. But I will say this. Kirthika of TSN put out a stat that the Raptors have the toughest strength of schedule until the play-in tournament cup.
Really? Okay.
And so I think we're going to learn a lot about this team. And so tanking is a possibility. It'll probably be something that you see early on, because I think you'll know a lot about what this team looks like by mid-November. I mean, they play Denver twice in the first month. They go on a Western Conference road trip in the first couple of weeks. It's like their opening games. I think the one game they have against Charlotte, which we talked about, I had them as a 9 seed. You have them as a team that's also in the play-in mix. They're not that tough. They're not that bad, and they might be the easiest matchup that the Raptors play in the month of October. And heading into November, they go on a road trip. So it's a really difficult Western Conference road trip at that. It's going to be a really difficult start of the season for the Toronto Raptors, and so I think if there is talks about tanking or anything like that, it's going to happen pretty early on. And so maybe it's good to know that stuff as soon as the season begins, than try to lose a bunch of games in March.
Yeah, I think that is 100% what the Raptors are going to try to be on. Like, I am personally excited for those two teams more than all the other teams, because again, these are the teams that people ignore.
I'm not.
Listen, I have to watch my team play basketball next year, where like our second option is maybe Jonathan Kuminga or B Pods in terms of offensively, right? Like, I have to watch Buddy Hield be a variance player who's literally wearing the lucky number 7, right? Like, that's what I have to watch, but it's okay. I'm gonna get through it. I just think that those two teams to me are gonna have seasons where they might not win right away, but these are important developmental seasons to get their guys to where they need to be for next year, right? I'm looking at players like what Gradey Dick can become if he can, get his game right. I'm looking at Trey Mann if he can really become that combo guard who can score at all 3 levels efficiently, right? These are players that can make a lot of shifts, and more than anything, I think both teams have players where even if they're not a part of the long-term plans, you can build up their stock to trade as assets and draft equity.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Honestly, as I was going through the Eastern Conference, I was like, the Charlotte Hornets, and I overlooked them, and I'm like, hold on, Brandon Miller was like legitimately very good last season.
He was good, yeah.
And like, I think he took nearly 7 threes a game and was like shooting nearly like 39% on them. He was legitimately a good basketball player last season. And now you have LaMelo back. They also have, I think they have more depth. I think I put them as the 9 seed over the Raptors because I trust their depth with guys like, the guys that they got from Dallas. Who am I thinking of? Josh Green and what's
Grant Williams.
Grant Williams, there we go.
Yeah.
What's his name? That guy. So like I think that they have some more depth that I trust in there. Somehow Taj Gibson is still in the NBA when I was looking at their roster.
He keeps the job,
he stays employed. I do think that they're sort of your 9-10 teams. I think that those are the teams that are really fighting for it. I'm out on the Chicago Bulls. I'd imagine you are as well.
Yeah, the Bulls, and by the way, this is very funny because I have a Bulls podcast with Hayes tomorrow, and he's going to hear this. Yeah, the Bulls are not going to be a good team. I don't think you're biased to say that the Bulls have made moves that would suggest they're not a good team. When you get rid of Alex Caruso for Josh Giddey straight up with no picks involved whatsoever, when not even 4 months ago, Alex was a player that could have got you multiple picks and players. I just think that's a loss. I think the Bulls are fine with that, though, because they drafted Matas. They want to just see what they have. I am one of the few that believes Josh Giddey was a floor negative for OKC. He was not good, but in a new situation in Chicago where he has the ball in his hands more, I feel like he'll be less of a floor negative because he'll have the ball more to be more productive. I think he trends to being like a triple-double threat because of how good his rebounding is, how he consistently pushes pace. And more importantly, I am a stan of this player. A lot of people have given up on him, but I want to see Lonzo Ball play a strong 16 minutes, even if he might not play. I just think that he has so much value for a team just based off of his mindset, how he moves the ball. And before he went down, he was a great defensive player and can shoot the hell out of the ball. So I want to see him in a better overall situation, but I don't think the Bulls are going for wins. I think they have their talent. They just want to see what they have. And then after this season, they'll try to see what their core is. I think they're just trying to figure things out, which is fine. I think teams have to move in different overall paces. Still having Zach Lavine on the roster when they were literally willing to attach picks to his contract and had no value. I don't think Zach Lavine is that bad. I just think his contract has gotten this bad, and we haven't seen him in so long that people think he's that bad of a player. I think Zach Lavine will rise, his value, which kind of opens up this question. I'm pretty sure you're going to say no. Would you be interested in Zach Lavine?
No.
At all?
I mean, no, because you would have to give up so much. Like in terms of money.
You think so?
In terms of money.
That. Yeah, no, not true. Yeah, true.
Bruce Brown for him? Like, the thing about, I guess Bruce Brown makes what, 20? I just think that the Raptors have so many young guys. I think Bruce Brown might be the third or the second highest paid player on the team, right? Like, this is a team of there's not a lot of big contracts left. You're not trading Quick or RJ or Scottie for him. Scottie's
no, you're not.
So he will now become the third highest player. But like the only big money contract that you're looking at is a guy like Bruce Brown, and you'd also have to give up a lot of your depth. Like if you need to throw in the contracts of a Boucher and things like that. So I just don't think that there's a trade in there for the Raptors because they don't think they have the money to make something like that work.
Right.
But I don't think that Zach Lavine is an albatross of a contract either, because I think Zach Lavine is a good player. I'm actually I do like Zach Lavine. I think that he can be a good player. I think he's gotten a really bad rap because, I think there's a bit of a Chicago stink there. And I'm with you about Lonzo coming back healthy. But as we talked about it when we mentioned the Hornets, I think your first thing was Melo needs to be healthy. Yeah,
exactly.
Lonzo being healthy, even bigger. And hopefully it's not that big of an ask. It would be fun to see Lonzo Ball out there again. I just think that we saw with Bradley Beal, he was able to be moved with a no trade clause. There are going to be there's no such thing as an unmovable contract. We see this all the time. Joe Johnson was that for years and he was traded. There's always that contract in the league where it's you try to give so many picks and still teams aren't biting. Well, once the midseason hits, and this is kind of Masai Ujiri's favorite thing to say, is you have teams at the end of the season and teams in the middle of the season who panic, make moves because they, bought this idea in the beginning of the season thinking their team is going to be so good. And then they realize that that's not the case. And maybe they need to sell a star. Maybe they need to make their other stars happy, like a Kevin Durant. You need to bring in a Bradley Beal. You need to bring in that extra guy. So I think that Zach Lavine can be moved and will be moved because we see this happen way too often in the NBA.
Yeah, and I definitely hear you. I think he is a good player, but again, the Raptors are at a point where they don't have much big salary, which means a lot of players would have to be packaged, and it just doesn't make much sense.
It doesn't make sense for the Raptors. I don't see them in it. They don't have big money to move. And they would have to give up, like you said, a ton of their depth, and it would make absolutely no reason for the Raptors to do that at this point.
Yeah, no. So that's something I can 100% get behind. But I'll say this, in terms of the Raptors and what they've done, what's the biggest thing you're looking forward to this season for the Raptors? And really, what would make you say that this was a successful season for the Raptors if you saw that?
Honestly, their defense, I think so much of it comes down to their defense. I think, of course, it's the continued growth of Scottie Barnes, right? He was an all-star once.
Right.
Can you go back and replicate that? Can you do that again? Also, seeing the chemistry between Emmanuel Quickley and Scottie Barnes is going to be really big. You want to see Scottie take that sort of superstar leap. He showed it with his three-point shooting. I'm also going to need to see a little bit of a midi, Scottie. I know that that's something that people are moving out, but I think you need that when you're a star. I think if you want to cement yourself as a star in this league, you need to see things like that. I think from RJ Barrett, you need to see his continued shooting streak. I mean, RJ Barrett was just a monster from the corners last season. He was automatic. Those threes were genuinely automatic, and he's also a bully inside. I think I'd imagine
he gave us 40 points. I remember that game. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I think he'll continue to be a bully inside. I think for Emmanuel Quickley, you need to see a continued improvement and steps forward there. I think the pull-up shooting needs to really come along. I think his pick and roll game with Jakob Poeltl is going to be really big for what this Raptors team can do. But all in all, as a team, it's really just about, can you hold up defensively? Do you hold up defensively? And what does the chemistry look like with your best players on the court? Because if this team is going to roll
Agreed.
out there with BBQ, then let's see it. Let's see it, and especially between, I think, Quickly and Scottie there.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. I think that the defense, just seeing the growth in that as a team, even if you're not going to be that great, matters, because then you have a season and a blueprint to how you want to build it up moving forward. I think that matters the most, to just set the tone and set the precedent of Raptors ball getting back to its roots this season. If you're able to do that, I think that overall will be a successful season. Also, I think if the Raptors are able to get a good enough draft pick where, okay, we didn't tank, but we still have a good enough talent pool, because again, next year's draft is really hyped up to be one of the best drafts in recent memory. I don't think the Raptors need some like top 2 or 3 pick. I just think they have to get the right guy with their development to hit on, and they can do that.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's exactly what you need to be banking on and hoping for. I think a lot of people are looking at that top of the draft and saying, just tank now. And I think as Raptor fans, you kind of see that. That was a conversation that was had in 2021, and tanking made sense then. But it was a conversation that was had in 2021 where it's like, you just tank, and all your guys will just play with the new young superstar and everything will look good. But guess what? Those guys go from being 25, 26 to being 28. And you're like, nope, they're not part of the young core anymore. Now we got to pivot. And it's like, you can't keep doing that, because that's a cycle that continues to repeat itself, where now the new young shiny star you get is too young for the older vets that you now have on your team, because guys keep getting older. And also, you can't just roll out there with 5 rookies at one time. I mean, Detroit has learned that. And the Raptors also have a ton of rookies this season, and we haven't talked about any of them, because guess what? Their development is going to come down the line. It's not about what they can do for you right now. It's about what they can look like down the line, and there's still a lot of questions to be had there. So I think just tanking and not solving all your problems doesn't work. If it did work, then we wouldn't be talking about the Charlotte Hornets in the way that we are now. We're like, maybe they can put it together this year. It would have been, they would have been champs a million years ago. The Pistons would have been champs a million years ago. That's just not how it works in terms of team building. So
that's a great point. And also pray for my city, because we'll be going to more Detroit games. I just want you to know, as someone that goes to Pistons games, I went to like 6 games last year. Yeah. They called my phone and asked me, am I coming back to see more?
Oh my God,
I think
really?
That shows you, yes. I think that shows you where things are in terms of people actually buying any tickets. So I'm definitely going to be tapped in.
Tickets, I will say that. It's a sold out arena when Toronto comes around. Sold out arena.
Absolutely. Thank you to the Raptors fans for that. But yeah, that's why I find the Raptors as such an interesting team, because again, these are the seasons that matter. Like, I feel like the Raptors with their core, if things work out, they're probably like maybe 4 to 5 years away from really becoming like another true contender back to what they were in the past. And these are like the dog days.
So sorry to interrupt. 2 years away from being 2 years away. That's what we say in Toronto.
Okay. 2 years away from being 2 years away. Absolutely. So yeah, I think that is a perfect way to explain that. I think for me, it's the same thing. Seeing the defense grow and make that be the principle is important. But me personally, I also want to see the offense be in a stable enough position where guys look comfortable. It doesn't look as overall clunky. And I want to see the Raptors get back to consistently getting out in transition and attacking those mismatches. I think that was another big strength that they had when they were at their best previously in the past.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, that's what like Vision 6-9 was built on, right? Like, it was built on being the best defensive team in basketball. I mean, you can look at what the Orlando Magic are building and saying, like, Jeff Weltman, part of Raptors front office at one point, is now the lead of the Orlando Magic front office. Like, this is the same sort of brain trust that's looking at the type of players that they want to build with. And on the offensive end, what the Raptors were doing was mismatch hunting. And I think it's a lot easier to mismatch hunt when you have a bunch of 6'9" really big guys. And no other team is playing with 4 6'9" players at any given time, or 6'9" plus players, so you have your center in there. So it was a lot easier to do. I think now you have a smaller team, a team that doesn't have as much size. You're not really necessarily getting all of those mismatches that you would have gotten in previous years. Gradey Dick is big, and so I think that's part of why his size matters, but he's not the type of guy who's sort of bullying your player, right? Like, he's not what you had before, where you got to pick your poison between OG and Siakam. You have to,
Right.
it's not the same thing. So Raptors basketball is just, they've moved away from Vision 6-9. They've decided to sort of dead that and bring in this new version. But I agree that like the offense needs to change. What they had last season was, it was 0.5 offense, which is you got to make a decision in 0.5 seconds. It was less of the ball dominant Fred VanVleet or Kyle Lowry or DeMar DeRozan just pounding the ball or Pascal Siakam. It was a lot less of the pick and rolls that the Raptors run. And I think you have two elite pick and roll guys in Quick, who, was a great pull-up shooter, so that pick and roll game should be good. And Yak, who is an elite screener. So there should be that pick and roll chemistry there. We also saw Scottie Barnes take a next step as being a guy in the pick and roll as well. So I think the Raptors should be able to do some of the things that's just a little bit more normal, a little bit easier, a little bit less read and react, and a little bit less just 0.5 seconds, because I think what we found with a lot of young guys is that's really difficult for them to do right away. There are guys who just, in terms of like trusting the decision making of like, you have 0.5 seconds to decide what you want to do, it becomes overwhelming, especially with a new team, with a new coach and a new system and a lot of young guys. So I think, Darko was maybe a little overly optimistic on how he can change this Raptors offense. And I think this year he's dialing it down back a bit, which is necessary when you have a team that is just so incredibly young and needing to find their own rules. You also don't have guys that totally understand their own roles. And I think this season you have a more defined team where you don't think about, am I starting or am I coming off the bench? I think who the 5 starters are, at least 4 of them. I think Gradey is probably that 5th starter. So it's just, it feels a lot easier to implement an offense. And I do think that the offense needs to be less aggressive because last season's was just overwhelming for, I think, the guys as well.
I think that's fair. Just making sure that things are calm, players are comfortable and able to implement what they have been working on is really a key focus for this season. So I think that's fair. I think we both highlighted what we're most looking forward to. But I think the other thing that does matter, which I'm sure he'll get better at this, but I have to ask, when you're looking at Scottie Barnes as a player, what do you think he needs to do to peak out, if not be way better than what Pascal Siakam was for this team?
That's really interesting. I think like the first thing that's going to jump out at people's head is like, the 3-point shooting, which he was already flat out better than Pascal Siakam at. Right away. I also think that like being like, he is bigger than Siakam. He is a more dominant force than Siakam. Siakam has a lot of finesse, right? Siakam can spin by a guy and finish there, but Scottie can really force his way to the rim, really force his way inside. I think Scottie has the ability to be a superstar, and I think he's just got to take that next step. He's got to be able to demand the ball. I think, with people who maybe watch the Pacers, one of the bigger critiques of Pascal Siakam is his ability to get lost in the offense sometimes, and inability to put his impact and force on the game. Like you got to find Pascal, and then once the offense finds Pascal, he's money. But as a star, you have to demand, like, it's got to come to you. You have to be the nucleus. You have to sort of be, and I think Scottie has a much better ability to do that. One, he's handling the ball a ton, so the ball is already in his hands. And 2, I think his outside shot really does help with that. I think being able to shoot from the outside really does matter in moments like this. I think being big and being a bully inside is something that we see from Scottie quite a bit. And I think that was that next level in Scottie's game. And then defensively, I think with Pascal, he is a key part of an elite defense. But I think with Scottie, he can at times just like, he did for a good chunk, anchor a defense, right? Like you don't want that because you don't want the toll on his body. But, Pascal obviously had the benefit of playing alongside OG Anunoby. Why wouldn't you want him to anchor your defense? But I think that like Scottie has the ability to do it all. He can be you mentioned it, the sort of triple double guy, because he can do it all there. So I think Scottie has shown an ability to sort of score in different ways and in more dominant ways and just impose himself on a game more, which I think if there's a critique I have of Pascal Siakam, who I love and I think is fantastic, is he kind of gets lost sometimes and you need him to impose his will on a game more. And I think Scottie can certainly do that.
Yeah, and I love that you brought up the point about imposing wills, because I felt like early on, Scottie was deferring to Siakam, but as you saw the season go, he started to just take more and more onus on himself. And then after Siakam was gone, there was a transitionary period, but Scottie was still showing signs that he wanted to be able to take over the games. And I think that with him having his long-term contract already being signed, he has nothing but confidence to really be that player for the Raptors. So he's another guy that I can't wait to see just grow in real time because he shows a lot of promise. He's for sure, no matter what, a lock top 2 player for his draft class, and building up into that, he can be the best. I really do believe that. So I'm excited to see what we'll see from year, what is it, 5, Scottie? I believe year 4, my bad. Year 4, Scottie and the Toronto Raptors. I can wait to see how that pans out. But I want to say thank you so much, Iman, for doubling back for the pod again. We always have great conversations, always. It just goes so well. You are very energetic. You love the game. You spit facts about the game. So make sure to go tap into Iman. All of her links will be in the description again. If I have this right, she is available on the Pros and Claws Substack, so go tap in there. Also, Dishes and Dimes is coming back. I'm excited for that as well, so go tap in. All of those links will be in the description and the chat. Any last words for the pod?
Yeah, go Raptors, go. I don't know.
Cool. Well, have a good one, people. We'll catch you for the next podcast episode. Peace out, people.